On his first day back in office, Donald Trump pardoned over 1,500 January 6 protesters and prisoners, and most of the Washington, D.C., most of the people had no reaction to it. So, Chris, you wrote about this in your latest Beltway brief. After 4 years of congressional investigations, we saw all the FBI witch hunts. Why was there just such this lackluster response to these Donald Trump pardons?
Now, we used to see, anything remotely like this would have just received howls of execration from the corporate media and from the politicians. All of those so obnoxious bumper stickers. This is not normal, they all say, and you can see on some of your neighbors' cars if you live in a state like I do. Or that word that we used to hear every hour of the day when we were watching the news during Trump's first administration, unprecedented, which, by the way, I was the Daily Caller editor-in-chief over there at the time. I banned the word because I got news shit. No 25-year-old in the history has the right to use the word unprecedented. Almost everything has happened before. But you hear it all the time. And you know what? That word didn't appear in any coverage that I looked at. The LA Times didn't include it. They actually didn't even put it on their homepage. Granted, California has a lot of things going on. The New York Times put it in the bottom right of the fold. Just a blip. The Washington Post, even though it dedicated its homepage to all of that, also placed it where the New York Times placed it. Really, the only outlet that freaked out was CNN and Brian Stelter, who CNN just rescued from his apartment after 2 years of being laid off by them, to come back and just do kind of the same old thing that he was always doing and have his flip outs. And according to him, well, everyone else was noticing the flurry of executive actions, the sea change in government. Well, the founding editor of Politico was saying that, well, Donald Trump is still trying to become a good president. He is undeniably the greatest living statesman in America who defines this era. And everyone needs to understand that. He was out there saying, well, people are focusing on the wrong things, everyone except for us. That everybody they all live in these right-wing bubbles. But it turns out, bubble is his. And it's getting smaller and smaller. And so I tried to figure out the reasons. Why did, after years of flipping out over really minor things, did this sweeping pardon not receive the flip out that you'd expect? And I think there's a few. One, Donald Trump promised to do this. Very much unlike Joe Biden, which is another reason that people didn't flip out. He promised repeatedly that he was going to end this injustice. He was going to free people. He was going to review cases. He was going to pardon crimes. And you compare that to Joe Biden, by the way, who said repeatedly, and his allies said repeatedly, that they were not going to be issuing pardons for the Biden family. Well, that turned out to be a lie, and that also kind of slowed people down. Then you have the fact that the American people just, they kind of understand that this has been the largest DOJ operation in history, or one of the largest manhunts in history, all the way back to Bonnie and Clyde, and that even though some people did go to prison, and even though there were some bad people down there, it's been years of people being in prison. That there's a lot of folks in prison who maybe ought not to be in prison. That there's been overreach. That there's been lies by the government on this. These things, and at the same time, it all comes into what we've talked about the last 2 days, which is a newfound respect for Donald Trump. His political legitimacy has never been so high. Previously, Democrats, and John Harris writes this in his Politico essay, tried to dismiss him as fringe or as crazy or as outside the law or outside the norm. And that just hasn't worked, and it's not going to work. He's a great statesman. He's someone who needs to be listened to. All of those things came together and kind of just muted Democrat response.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you say, and I wonder if this is going to be a trend when it comes to a lot of the things that Trump does early on. Or is this just the shock and awe of the first few days? But one thing I think we can say is true is that, and it does bear saying. I don't like switching things and saying, well, if the shoe was on the other foot, but it's helpful here. If this had happened to people on the left, there would already be mainstream Hollywood movies about the injustice, taking the best cases of the people who were treated the most unfairly. And some of the biggest actors and actresses in the country would be playing those roles and showing how this was unpatriotic, un-American, violation of the First Amendment. All of that would be done, and these people would be lauded as heroes, and there would be lawsuits paying them millions of dollars for being treated like this. And we all know that. But what's interesting in this situation is it almost seems like you're saying Maybe some people kind of sense that on the other side, and for whatever reason, rightly, whether you're right or wrong, they're not outright fighting it. Do you think this lasts? Is this part of a trend? Will this happen more or not?
I do think it's I think it's shock and awe. If you look at these executive orders, this is actually unprecedented in modern political history. The number of executive orders signed on the first day, from one in his first term on his first day to 200 on his first day of his second term, is a massive shift. And Democrats are extremely good at fighting these sorts of things. They have the NGOs, often funded with money from taxpayers and money that the government fleeces from different corporations and lawsuits that they launch on the behest of these NGOs. And then they give the winnings back to the NGOs, and it powers this massive left-wing ecosystem. They're going to sue the heck out of everyone who's got anything to do with anything. You can't just eliminate like Donald Trump did in an executive order last night, affirmative action, which LBJ signed into action with an executive order. You can't just change gender roles. You ought to be able to, and say that there's only man and woman without getting sued by these left-wing groups. But even the left does have somewhat finite resources and a finite level of lawyers. This is an overwhelming tidal wave of actions. It's not going to be millions of dollars. It's going to be billions and billions of dollars that need to be spent by the left to try and push back against establishing what exactly the authority of the executive is. I think, Matt, that our mutual friend, John Yoo, is probably going to find himself in rather high demand defending some of these things from the administration.
Yeah, Chris, I look at it and everybody's trying to kiss the ring, right? Everybody was in Washington, D.C. this weekend for all the inauguration, all the balls. Zuckerberg was there. Bezos was there, right? If you're anybody, now you want to be part of this Trump administration. And that's a different thing that we saw from 2016, right? Trump is now the cool guy, like you're saying. He's legitimate. It feels like that's also tied back into the J6 stuff, right? You don't see the lack of outrage because everybody's trying to be on the cool kids team.
It's wild, the change that we've seen. I think COVID had a lot to do with it. I think the fact that Democrats put up two of the least cool people in a row, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and tried to act like they actually were really cool. Dark Joe Biden with his aviators and Brat Summer. The fact that Donald Trump literally is the funniest president ever caught on camera. We used to think that was Ronald Reagan because he told a couple wonderful dad jokes, like some really good stuff. But it turns out it's Donald Trump who's capable of making fun of himself, who goes into these strange places. Did you see his Truth Social post today? You could tell he had control over his own account. He just posted an AI image of him roaring next to a lion.
Him and the lion.
In the Serengeti.
Yes.
It was awesome. He was dancing with a sword on the stage. Mm-hmm. It's like if Berlusconi still had brain cells to knock together back in the day. He's a really funny and really omnipresent, someone who understands culture, someone who's been around culture for a long time, someone who can make fun of himself, someone who can make fun of his friends. He's a politician that the left is still just beginning to try to understand. And he actually, call any black pillars call those people who are really down on the ability to save the republic, because it turned out that we had just begun to fight. And now that you're actually seeing those fights, we'll wait to see what the reactions are, see what the deep state does, what the NGOs that back them up do. It's a good moment. It's the beginning.
I saw my meme I like so much the most so far is Trump with the sword, and it says, "Well, you were swordjacking. I was learning the blade." It's pretty good stuff. I think that the cultural aspect here, it's so important that we just hammer this one home, because it needs to you can't say this enough, and ultimately you have to do it. But the reason that the right wasn't cool, or the right was not culturally effective, is because, in my mind, it's so insecure. There's no authentic. People weren't authentic. They were trying. It's like the kid outside the party trying to get in. I can do that too. Well, what if the shoe is on the other foot? Democrats are the real racist.
Conservative comedian.
Yeah,
I'm the conservative Gen Zer. It's like, why don't you just be a Gen Zer or a comedian?
Exactly. It's not Democrats the real racist. These people blah blah blah. It's saying no. We have our own identity. We know who we are. And this is what I want to do. And that's what Trump is like. And he's comfortable in his own skin, as our friend Matthew Marston loves to point out. I mean, being comfortable in your own skin counts for everything because you can't fake that. And so there's an authenticity of no. If we think that immigration is actually a problem, right, legal immigration, then you say, well, what are all the things we would need to do to actually solve that problem? And if you're not doing that, you don't actually think it's a problem, right? You're insecure, or you're aping, you're pretending to be something you're not. And we've seen that disappear, and then the people are drawn to figures who are authentic and are just actually trying to do the thing. And that's what you see happening now. You see people saying, "Oh my gosh, well these people aren't fakers, you know? They actually have beliefs, they have stuff they want to do. You can just do things. They're going out and doing them." Okay, that's number one.
And at the same time, the Democrats started to do what conservatives had always done. You had Matt Damon putting out movies about fracking. Like previously, what made Hollywood so good was it just put out movies that had liberal values and liberal undertones in them. That was it. And as opposed to conservatives, you put out conservative film.
Right.
And that was the first message. Liberals started to put out liberal film, left-wing film, Democrat film. All of their messages put politics above entertainment as opposed to taking a back seat. I mean, Matt Damon's movie about fracking absolutely bombed because people didn't want to be hit with that. And that was just the beginning. It's on Jimmy Kimmel. It's on all the late nights, Stephen Colbert. Politics comes before entertainment. And that's just not fun. It's not entertaining.
Yes. And it's a key point, and you see it all over the place. It's exposed itself. It's gotten so bad where they're not trying to do the thing, and whatever the thing is, they're not just trying to be a comedian and make me laugh. They're not trying to, movie keep me entertained. They're trying to do this politicized thing and jump up and down for their masters and say, "Look at me, I deserve more jobs because I agree with you." And it's slavish. It's not fitting for human beings, and it's not cool, and it's not attractive because of how slavish it is. Now, the second thing I want to throw out there for you guys, and it's the importance of Chris's point here, is that it's not just that Trump is authentic in this way and unafraid and comfortable in his own skin. It also is, as Chris pointed out, that he is very good at media. He's been in media for a long time and a star, and The Apprentice made a lot of money for very good reason. And so there, I think, is another lesson that you just see over and over again, actually the right adopting with the memes and everything else. This is a facile use of media. I mean, right now the left is complaining, "Oh my gosh, these podcasts, and Joe Rogan's a fascist, and they have this whole network, and it's a big conspiracy." And there's no conspiracy. There's just a number of people who are good at media, who are doing the thing, and they're out there, and people are drawn to them.
They were mad at talk radio because they didn't have a Rush Limbaugh. They couldn't figure out how he was so good at what he did and that nobody else could step up on the left and do that. The left can't meme. They're not funny enough to go through and do this. They don't actually, it's not like the true beliefs that they can figure it out and connect that with humor. They don't have that ability. But Chris, what do you think? Is it all just fun and games with all the memes and everything?
No, it's grown into the broader culture. Yeah. It's essential. It's something it's rebellion. And I was wondering how long it was going to take. It's been shocking to see that different subcultures that still call themselves rebels, how actually whenever you see crews of them, how much they are wearing the badges and the paraphernalia of the liberal regime, which is staunchly in control. It seemed it lagged for a while. But youth often rebel against a system that oppresses them. And the system that they had over the last couple of years is oppressive. I remember talking to other parents and worrying, hey, we rebelled against the system, but we didn't grow up in a system that told us it's bad to be a male, it's bad to be a white, it's bad to be a cis, I guess. It's bad to be straight. It's bad to not mutilate your body. That makes you somewhat just more of a normie who's basic. We didn't grow up in that, and the rebellion that would have come out of us would have been tenfold. Now, fortunately, this youthful generation seems to have tampered down a little bit. Maybe they just popped in a Zin and decided they were going to vote for Donald Trump and make some memes and make fun of everything. But the rebellion against the stifling woke Puritanism, and it's totally descendant from Massachusetts Puritanism. I hate to besmirch my own people, but that's where this comes from, this whole thing, this whole concept of unforgivable sin that you've committed that must be constantly and publicly atoned for. It's so uncool and self-stifling that the young voters have completely rejected it. And that's who decides what is popular in culture, not me.
All right, when we're talking about culture, the thing that sticks out in my mind was my weekend in DC at the Starlight Ball, because all of the boxers, if you were a boxer, you were there, right? Mike Tyson was on one of the Paul brothers' shoulders, like up in the air above everybody else. That's what's going to stick out to me about this weekend. That and just how, even if they couldn't go, the people, of course, couldn't sit outside on the lawn with 100,000 chairs. It was all moved indoors for the inauguration itself. Everybody was still out in the streets. They were still excited to be there. We talked to them when we were going from event to event, and just the excitement, right? So taking back the culture with the boxers and all the excitement in the streets. Bedford, what are you going to remember most about this weekend?
How about all the connections to Mike Tyson? Everybody who's made a couple $1 million on beating up Mike Tyson or gotten their ear bitten off by Mike Tyson, been in the movie with Mike Tyson, seems to have all been here. And one of my takeaways also was the great and super intelligent decision that I had to not follow you people to those balls, those freezing cold conditions where you nearly went the way of the Donner Party. The stories the next morning sounded like you were ready to eat each other in a pass and die in those frigid conditions, whereas I, in my wisdom, was drinking beer at the Tune Inn.
The worst part about it is we were separated. Peterson and I weren't even at the same part of town. We went to different locations, so we couldn't even carpool together on the way back.
Not all of us could make it to the fanciest ball,
Sorry.
but Elegant Jill did, and it didn't matter, both of us, wherever we were or not. The end of that night, for many people, they will remember the rest of their lives for the cluster of the logical cluster, explosion of disaster and freezingness at the end. That was the only unpleasant thing about the weekend, however. Everything else about it was incredible, most especially all the people coming together and swirling around. And I mean, it's like we said the other day.
Such a vibe shift.
The Tucker Christmas movie, I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
That's what it looks like.
Friends of mine were talking. He showed up at a hotel bar, and was hanging out with people. This is like the kind of place where everyone knows your name. You're meeting all the people from all over the country are mingling. Now, I do think this shows the potential for something like what the Democrats have pulled off since time immemorial now, where it just becomes the dominant culture is a healthy one, right? And it's not the case yet. I don't want to make too much of it. It's like we have the boxers, we have a couple, we have the early forces assembling. But what it shows you is the possibility, maybe, of a majority culture that is much, much healthier than the one we have now.
Bedford, one final word.
I agree. I mean, 2 years ago, I didn't think that there was enough. I didn't think I would see a Republican president, even Donald Trump, come in and be able to tackle this in the way it needed. And I didn't think that even if he did, the culture would back him. I thought the American people might not want some of the stuff that is going to be required to fix us. And we're still, by the way, have a lot of that to sort out. But these last couple of days in particular have given me a lot of hope.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy right now. There's a lot of hope, and we need it because this is going to be a big fight, and we'll be documenting it here in Bedford. You'll be a huge part of that. So we'll catch you again soon.